Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this awakening, transformative planet of ours. This is Inspired Living. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. And today we're going to go a little bit deeper and prospect for extra-dimensional beings, extraterrestrials, some would call aliens. We're going to talk about the latest news that's been rolling out, how this impacts society. I always love the quote that says, not believing in aliens is like taking a spoonful of water from the ocean and saying there are no whales and sharks in the ocean because there are none in my spoon. And we know, as we learn from the James Webb Telescope, as we learn about our universe, what's going down in society down here, which I call the drip, drip, drip format, which it's slowly been dripping out for 70 plus years. We're going to spend the next hour talking about, have extra dimensional beings and ETs visit us, and are they going to reveal themselves to us? So it's something I've always been interested, so we're going to do some prospecting on that, and I'm looking forward just to another fun episode here of Inspired Living. Big shout out to our inspired listeners all out around the globe. Thank you for tuning in. It's internet radio, no passwords, no membership, no username, no BS. You can tune in from anywhere on any device, and I know that we have listeners all around the world because our Facebook page is continuously growing by the week. I just welcomed 8 new inspired listeners to the Facebook page. So if you want to follow us on social media, follow what's coming up for the show. We have another guest come up here in just a few weeks. It will be at the end of September, actually. Looking forward to having him on and the topics we're going to cover then. But if you want to stay up to date with what's going on in Inspired Living, you can go to Facebook and look for the Inspired Living radio page. It's radio and podcasts. You can also follow us at Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Inspired for Us. That's the number 4 in the middle of it. So Inspired, the number 4 Us, because we're here to be inspired for you. And you can also catch us now on your favorite podcasting platform, whatever that may be, from iTunes to Spotify to iHeartRadio to SoundCloud to YouTube. You can also go over to OMTimes Radio, the main page, and go to the archive show and catch all of our past 7+ seasons that we've been doing here on OMTimes. And it's just a lot of fun. And, you know, thank you to the listeners. I'm really grateful and honored to all the inspired listeners, where we like to say you are the inspired and the inspiration, because you've helped move Inspired Living into a top-rated podcast. And I know that there's thousands of podcasts out there for you to listen to. So just very honored that you would, download and leave reviews. We're now number 19 out of the FeedSpot's best 100 inspirational podcasts to listen to in 2022. And I think that's because we cover many topics. You know, it's Inspired Living, but we cover everything from medicine to meditations to metaphysics to mindfulness. And today we're going to be talking about aliens, metamaterial, medium transportation, or not medium transportation. What do we want to call it? I got to get all this lingo down here. It is. Oh, I'll come up with it here. Metamaterials and transportation. So learning a lot of things. So again, thank you for hanging out with us this hour here on OMTimes Radio. And let's just talk about what's going on. Let's do a little bit, well, teleportation would be one of them for sure. Let's beam me up. My producer's sending me some comments. Love it. Let's take this next hour to really just kind of backtrack a little bit how we got here. How do I even talk about, because not everybody wants to talk about extra dimensional beings or extraterrestrials. I like to say higher dimensional beings because obviously their technology is far superior than ours, which means they more than likely have the ability to bend space and time, or what Einstein called the theory of relativity, and that's using dimensions to travel across such a big universe. We'll get more into detail in that in just a few minutes, but I like to use extraterrestrials or higher dimensional beings. And how did we get to this episode? I've done a few podcasts in the past here on Inspired Living, talking about first contact, some of my predictions in the roaring 20s of this decade, that we would learn that we're not alone officially and publicly here on Earth, meaning that there's another intelligence. There's lots of intelligence around us. If you, like I said, that with that quote about taking a spoon and dipping in the ocean, we know by science standards and by fact today that both dolphins and whales communicate. They're sentient beings, which means they have emotions, they care for their young, they nurse their young. But we've also come to realize that octopus is a sentient being. It has logic, it has reason, it has emotions. And when things are of sentient abilities, that means that there is a higher consciousness there. That means, that we're just not the only intelligent species on this planet, especially with everything going on in today's world and how we're not taking care of our planet. But the thing that's interesting to me is when I first became interested in this topic, I've had two experiences, and I do believe that experiences pave the path for your many soul adventures you have, and who you become and what you're interested in. And mine goes all the way back to when I was a little boy. I was about 5 years old when I saw my first unidentified flying object. And what that is, I don't know if it was alien or little green men, I don't know. But when we were traveling at night, and if you look up in the night sky, you see satellites that will usually travel in some sort of straight orbit. And this thing, we stopped, pulled off the side of the road, turned our lights off. We sat there. I was with my dad. And we sat there probably for about 15 minutes watching this thing zip all around the sky in no straight formation. It just zipped and zigged and zagged, and then it just disappeared. Now, that would be the classification of an unidentified flying object. Now, several years later, when I was in the Coast Guard, I had another experience with balls of light and spheres off the coast of Puerto Rico, which is known as a very hot spot in the world, but also the tip of the Bermuda Triangle. And I had talked about that on previous podcasts, about this, about full disclosure, about first contact. And there's been some recent revelations that have come to light in the last few weeks, which, is interesting to me because it doesn't get headline news, and it should. So I thought, after being off the air for a couple of weeks, being on vacation and being out of country on international travel, I started looking at this, and I was always looking up at the sky when I was traveling as well, and wanted to talk a little bit more. Have we already been visited by extraterrestrials and higher dimensional beings? I'll leave that for you to decide, your own personal experience and your own belief system. But I personally believe, with my experiences, what I've seen, what I've studied, what I've researched, and what I've come to know, is they have, and they've been with us for a long time. This is the longest running conspiracy theory known to mankind. This goes all the way back to paintings in the 1500s, because people would say, well, it's military. My wife would actually debate me and say it's military. Well, that's great and that's dandy, but there wasn't military back in the 1500s, and even going pre-1500s. There was no military with that type of technology. So it's interesting to me that the longest running conspiracy theory continues to gain momentum, continues to keep coming up in our reality, in our news cycles. And today I just want to, just share some latest news, some perspectives, and just some updates coming out of the field of ufology, space travel, and our search for extraterrestrial life and higher dimensional beings. Some of you listening today may find that factual, like myself. You may find it to be a fallacy, which, that is the perspective that you're offered. And then, of course, some would say that it's fantasy. So, what's next for the evolution for the human race, our planet? We have a new space force that are actually called guardians. Space travel. What society's going to do when they realize that we're not alone? What's that going to do for religion? What's that going to do for our technology? So we're going to prospect today further on this, what I say is one of the most profound, compelling, and inspiring questions in science and in spirituality, and indeed all of philosophy. And actually, NASA's third science question is, are we alone? Well, let's take this next few minutes to discuss that. Now, just a few weeks ago, Congress, let's start with the latest news and then we'll backtrack how I became involved with this, not only with my personal experiences, But in my family tree, Neil Armstrong is in my family tree, and so I've always been, since I was a little boy, with that experience. And my relationship to Neil Armstrong as a distant relative, first man on the moon, I've always been just very interested in this topic. But it was a few weeks ago that it really got interesting for me. I believe I was just getting back. It was on the 22nd of August that Congress, the Senate Intelligence Committee, met, and it was a public hearing, which means it was open to the public to listen and in the press. And I remember being, I think we were in Scotland, I believe, is where we were traveling. We did Scotland, Norway, and Iceland. Fantastic countries, awesome people. But it was interesting because the Congress released to the public that UFOs have non-human origins. Let me say that again. UFOs have non-human origin. Now, does that mean they come from outer space? Possibly. Could they already be here on the Earth? We know more about our moon than we do our own oceans. Do they have technology that allows them to keep themselves hidden from us when the time is right to reveal? I always think Star Trek and their prime directive was not to reveal themselves, because that could change culture, it could change society, it could actually put them to become a deity, a god within their own belief systems of what people would think of them, because they're more advanced or have more advanced technology. So that was very interesting to me watching this this Senate hearing, that Congress is now, and I quote, talk about transmedium objects. That's what I was looking for, Chris. Not teleportation, but transmedium objects. And what that definition is now defined, according to our government, is transmedium objects are anything that can go from space through the air and into water without changing its makeup. Now, this has also been related to what we call metamaterials. And metamaterials are materials that have been found, reverse engineered, and they don't usually have properties known to our elemental charts. So element 115, element 116 are always interesting to me if you want to do a little bit of your own research on that category. But metamaterials usually has some sort of makeup, but the way that they're put together doesn't, as of current physics today, doesn't make sense to us with that type of material, and that's called metamaterials. So the new definition of UFOs, now here's the key part, this is the latest news. The new definition of UFOs, according to our Congress, according to our government, excludes man-made objects. So they've come out publicly and have said UFOs, quote unquote, have non-human origins, there's transmedium objects, and there's a new definition that excludes man-made objects, which would tell you, if it's not man-made, then what is it? And if it's non-human origin, what is it? These are the questions that we ask on Inspired Living. We challenge you to go deeper and to, find, that diamond within, and find, what's right, fits your narrative, I guess. And for me, that is just literally saying they're there, they're around, they're watching us, because this becomes a national security issue. This is all about national security. So it's not a drone from China. It's not the latest technology from Russia. People have debated that for years. It's our enemy's latest technology. Well, it's not, because it's not man-made and it's non-human origin. Now, what's interesting is this report is out there. You can research it. August 22nd, 2022 is a year ago, just almost a year ago in June of 2021. The Pentagon came out with their own 9-page report declassifying what they now call UAPs, which is the same damn thing. It's UFOs, it's unidentified flying objects. UAPs is unidentified aerial phenomenon. So they're reclassifying and coining their own phrase as UAPs, but most of the public would know them as UFOs. So that was just interesting to me. But a year ago, they came out with a 9-page report. I read it, released to the public, and there was 144 cases in which 143 they could not actually confirm if it was, they didn't know what it was. And that's saying a lot for our government to admit that they don't know something. I've worked for government for almost 20 years, and they never admit to not knowing anything. So what's interesting to me is that we're slowly now, this drip, drip, drip is coming out more and more, and we're getting more comfortable with the knowledge and the communications that we may not be alone in this universe. And like I said, I think that is one of the in my opinion, I think it's one of the most profound, compelling, and inspiring questions in science and in spirituality, because it's going to change everything once we realize we're not alone. People say, well, how's that going to impact me? Well, we start, receiving information and reverse engineering, for philosophy, for physics, for quantum computing, for future space travel. Very similar to when the microscope first came into reality. Microscope was just a theory at one point, and the belief system debated for hundreds of years was if you didn't see it with your own eye, it didn't exist. Well, we know that not to be true anymore. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So the microscope changed philosophies. The telescope changed philosophies and ideas. And I believe that when the species is ready to reveal themselves to us, because I don't believe that they're hostile, and I'll share some after the break, I'll share some examples of why I don't think they're hostile. They are going to open up opportunities for us that will change the mindset. So that's exciting to me. That's inspiring to me. And what bigger realization to realize in a universe that's mathematically incomprehensible that we're not the only intelligent species, and that there's actually somebody more farther advanced than us, whether they're coming from outer space or whether they've been here the whole time. A lot of ancient astronaut theories are that they've been here this whole time and they've been watching us. But we're going to go to our first break, and when we come back, we're going to continue this fascinating and compelling conversation. Have we already been visited by extraterrestrials and higher dimensional beings? I'll leave that up to you. Fact, fallacy, or fantasy? Come back and join me for the second half of this show, and we'll continue to prospect on this very question. So you're listening to Inspired Living here on OMTimes Radio. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hello, listeners. We hope you're enjoying the shows here on OMTimes Radio. Marc Lainhart here, and host of Inspired Living Radio. And I'd like to invite you to my morning show of inspiration, encouragement, healing, motivations, transformations, and discovering that diamond within. Metaphysical Mocha Mondays, every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on the Intuitive Prospector Facebook page and my YouTube channel, Soul Adventures. Dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
All right, and welcome back to Inspired Living. Today, we are exploring and prospecting, asking the question, have we already been visited by extraterrestrials and higher dimensional beings, and what does that mean for society moving forward? Make sure to go catch our former podcasts. I've done a couple of these episodes where we look at the evidence, the information, the communications around everything from the metaverse to multiple dimensions, to Einstein's theories. And we were just recently talking about what Congress has officially put out to the public, which Congress usually does not do. Now we have a 9-page declassified report, which means that the report's longer because not all of it's been declassified. So there's still classified information within that report. But that came out last year. We now skip to this year, 2022. We have the James Webb Telescope, 1 million miles out in its own orbit, sending us back information in very clear technology, and not just pictures. But we've now taken our first picture of our exoplanet. And an exoplanet, for those that you might be new to astrology or new to this whole concept, an exoplanet is a planet that falls into what we call the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold. So if you take Earth, for example, Earth is in a prime location of the Goldilocks zone, because if we were like Mercury or Venus, it'd be too hot. And our species could not survive that. If we go past Mars, and the further we go out past Saturn and Jupiter, then it gets colder. And what's interesting is this exoplanet, the James Webb Telescope just took a picture, and it just came back within the last 2 days. Now, it's still a little blurry, but it's interesting that we're now starting to capture pictures of exoplanets. And NASA has been quoted as saying that after James Webb Telescope goes live and starts to send back information, we may be able to see bio or text signatures of civilizations. Now, is that empirical proof? No, because as of right now, we have no way to get to these planets based on our modern physics, our understanding of propulsion, and I believe that will change over time with anti-gravity propulsion, which is a theory, quantum computing, mathematics, and of course the information and technology that we're not alone. But we've got the James Webb floating out there now, sending us back information. We've got the Artemis 1 project that's about to lift off. Hopefully, it was supposed to lift off last week and had engineering problems. But what's interesting to me, because I'm related to the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, why is it that it's been 50 years? This is something that goes through my mind. These are the questions I ask as the Intuitive Prospector. Why has it been 50 years since December of 1972 we stopped going to the moon cold turkey? We spent a lot of time, effort, and money and budgets to put men on the moon. Now, some would debate and theorize that we never went to the moon in the first place. I haven't found any proof of that we did not go. I'm actually quite the opposite, because I look at a lot of intel reports and government reports and things that have been researched, like moon rock and the Apollo missions, and but of course there's also people who believe the world is flat, but that's perspective, right? But what's interesting to me is that we just stopped going to the moon. And we didn't send any droids, we didn't send any rover vehicles like we did. We started focusing on Mars and the International Space Station to start doing all of this research up on the International Space Station. But now, after 50 years, we're going back to the moon with the Artemis 1 to actually start calling the moon, to actually set up a base there. Looking at the Artemis 1 project is going to go around the moon for about 45 days, and it's going to actually shoot the best locations to set up a habitat, which would also be close to water. So it's going to be in the darker side of the moon, where water can actually be processed and harnessed to sustain life on the moon. But then the moon will be the jumping off platform to take us to Mars, and then further out into the galaxy. It's in our nature. We're explorers, so it just makes sense. But the one thing that's interesting is we stopped going. Now, there are, I've done some research where Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, and other astronauts, including Neil Armstrong, have been, off record of saying that we were told not to go back. By who? They never talk about by who, but we were told not to go back. So that's always been interesting to me. But here we are going back with all this information coming out publicly. We now have Space Force and Guardians. We have a dedicated budget. I always just say follow the money. If you want to see what's going on, follow the budgets, follow the money, follow the congressional hearings and reports that come out of there. Not necessarily what you see on TMZ or what you see on other media channels, if you will, or even social media. But what's interesting to me is everything seems to be aligning to reveal, and of course Nick Pope, who is a ancient astronaut theorist who also worked for the UK's Department of Defense doing this exact same thing, has been talking about that society is being slowly prepared to reveal that we are not alone. I'm just wondering if we're ready for that as a species, and are the ETs waiting for us to prove that we can't implode? Now, if we back up a little bit, have you already been visited? My perspective, yes, we have, and there's just compelling evidence in history to support it, captured in paintings, captured in documentation, of writing, of symbols, going all the way back to one of the oldest language, which is the Sumerian language, and they talked about a species called the Anunnaki. There's just so much, evidence to show that we're not alone, and that's always been fascinating to me. So one of the quotes is from an astronaut that I read his book some time ago. And his name is Edgar D. Mitchell. I believe he was the sixth man on the moon. And he wrote a book called The Way of the Explorer, an Apollo's astronaut's journey through the material and the mystical worlds. And he's quoted as saying, and this is a quote from somebody that's been up in space, so I have to, I've never been to space yet. Maybe in the next 30 years, maybe that'll be an option and I could afford it. But I'm actually taking quotes from people that have been in space and have actually been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And Dr. Edgar Mitchell, very smart man, is quoted as saying, quote, yes, there have been ET visitations. There have been crash craft. There have been material and bodies recovered. There has been a certain amount of reverse engineering that has allowed some of these craft or some components, metamaterials, to be duplicated. And there is some group of people that may or may not be associated with the government at this point that have this knowledge. They've been attempting to conceal this knowledge. People in high-level government have very little, if any, valid information about this. Let me say that again. People in high-level government have very little, if any, valid information about this. It has been the subject of disinformation in order to deflect attention and create confusion so the truth doesn't come out, end quote. That's Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who wrote the book, The Way of the Explorer. It's a fascinating read. If you want to, get a perspective of somebody that's been to space several times, was the sixth man on the moon, then I would highly recommend this book. It's, to say that, yes, there have been ET visitations, and to say that the highest levels of the government may not know this, over the last few years, I've even noticed a few times watching, our television, where former presidents have been asked this, are we not alone? And you see them from body language. Two that come to mind is Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Now, when the audience started to laugh, he actually looked at the audience, Bill Clinton did, and said, that's not funny, stop laughing. But he never confirmed, that there was proof of ETs. Same with Barack Obama. He was asked on a late night television show, and he said there are things that we just don't understand or things that we don't comprehend, and it's a national security issue, so you can't really talk about it. So it's interesting they always put it back on national security, right? I mean, that's good for us, I guess, as a people, but at the same time, is it taken away from our ability to expand and to grow with this universe that is all around us? So, I've always said that we're not alone. We never were. I've stuck by that. My podcast, I talked about full disclosure and first contact at the public level back in 2019. You can go back and check that podcast out if you want, where I said in this decade, in our roaring 20s, we would know that we're not alone and that there will be proof to show either tech proof, bio-proof, text signatures, or signals received. Like I said, we may not be able to get there based on current transportation, but in the future, that will unlock the door for that. So one of the things I wish we would do moving forward is we should have a holiday. We have a lot of holidays now, so we should actually have a holiday called Space Day. And that's where all the lights on the planet are shut off for an hour at night to reduce not only light pollution, but so we can see the galaxy again, that wonder, that awe, that inspiration that we all look up. We all look to the stars and wonder, are we alone? The Fermi paradox says, if there's such a big place, why are we the only ones that are, beaming out signals and, lighting up the planet? That just seems like a waste of space. For those of you who've seen the movie Contact, it just seems like a really big waste of space if we're the only ones out there. So we should have a holiday called Space Day. where all the lights are shut off for an hour at night to reduce the light pollution, but so we can also see the galaxy again. So with that, I talked about, Dr. Edgar Mitchell and his perspective, Buzz Aldrin as well. But when it comes to other astronauts out there, again, I'm leaning on the experts. I'm leaning and I'm looking to the people that have actually done the work, the training, the studies, have gone into space, because that's all I have to go by. I've never been to space. I can't unless I've seen it with my own eye. But then I take my own experiences, the two experiences that I had when I was smaller and when I was in the Coast Guard, and I apply those to my understanding of my world. And I always say open-minded people do not care to be right. They care to understand. And I'm a very open-minded person. That's why I'm doing this show. And I don't care to be right. People will always say that I'm wrong, or I put on my tinfoil hat, the conspiracy theory. That's fine. I care to understand. There's never a right or wrong answer. Everything is about understanding. That's my perspective. Everything is about understanding. And I just want to learn more. But I also believe, that I would rather have an open mind, a mind opened by wonder, than one closed by belief. Let me say that again. I'd rather have a mind opened by wonder than one closed by belief. And to me, ufology, UAPs, first contact, technology that's farther advanced, that to me is wonder. So I go back to the astronauts. I've been reading a lot of books. There's actually a book that I'm reading right now about a college of very educated people that are looking at this phenomenon. And there's no shortage of astronauts who've spoke about UFO phenomenon. They've been, raising awareness about aliens and humanity for years. It's interesting with where the world's at today with such great, what's going around the world, global warming, people's, divide here in America. Maybe I thought, one of my predictions was a great coming together. And maybe that's currently with what, the passing of the Queen. Godspeed Your Majesty, by the way, over in the UK. And there's a lot of people that are coming together for that. But I've also talked about this great coming together, and maybe this will be that format, a natural event here on Earth or a extraterrestrial event that brings people together with all different perspectives. But the awareness has been there, the communications have been there, and those that have been out into space have been talking about this. Gordon Cooper, he's a aerospace engineer and one of the original 7 astronauts of the Project Mercury, is a great example to this. So Mercury came before Apollo. Apollo then led after the Apollo missions stopped. Then we started moving to the International Space Station, and then we started moving into the Space Shuttle. And from the Space Shuttle, then we took a break after we retired the Space Shuttle, and then we were relying on Russia to get our astronauts up to the International Space Station. And then a curious thing started to happen back in 2016. The government started to move to the private sector. Now, we're going to talk about why that's happening. But Gordon Cooper, who's an aerospace engineer, he's been quite frank. You can look him up, do your own research about UFOs, aliens, and the fact that the agency has played a huge role in the cover-up, because if the truth comes out, there's always the truth will set you free. And, it's interesting because NASA just a few months ago did a council of 24 theologians, and the perspective from a religious standpoint, what would happen if we say that there's a species that's more advanced than ours, further technology, worked through their technology, didn't implode on their technology, but worked through their aggressive behaviors of technology, and are willing to possibly share that with us. What happens overnight is that species would become a deity based on certain people's beliefs, and they would be worshipped as a god. If you've ever seen Star Trek, that's why they have the prime directive, is because once you see something that's advanced, then you're like, oh, it must be a god, and you worship it, and that's not it at all. So NASA just did this. Again, follow the money, follow the budgets. They paid for 24 theologians in all different religions to come together and to debate and to theorize what happens with society, if we say that we're not alone. I said earlier before the break, Nick Pope, former UK Department of Defense director for this stuff, has been saying, you can look him up as well, he's been talking about that we're getting ready with all the information, going to the moon, the James Webb Telescope, all these, public hearings from our Congress. This is all slowly going to come together, and he says that he's a little worried based on how society would respond. I believe you're going to have always 30% of people that just go, one way, and then you have 70% that go another. And I believe that it would be a welcome and a transformation for our planet, for our species, for our health, for our awareness, if we realized we weren't alone. So Dr. Brian O'Leary is another great example. You can research him. He's a former Princeton physics professor and NASA astronaut. And he told the world for years, quote, "There is an abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that alien civilizations from other worlds have been visiting us for a long time," end quote. So these astronauts, along with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, is also no exception. Before his recent passing, because he just passed, and I had to look it up, he was the sixth man to walk on the moon. Mitchell spent many years raising awareness about the fact that UFOs are real, and that they are not from our planet, but from the other solar systems or other dimensions. So that's where we start talking about extra dimensional beings, because in order to travel, you have to understand a few things about space travel and the theory of relativity. And hopefully I can not lose you here before we go. I'll tell you what, we'll come back from our second break, our final break. I'm going to break down the theory of relativity and explain it in the easiest way I can. But the universe is so big, in order to travel it, there has to be a way to bend space and time, because as of right now, there's no way to travel across the stars with our modern technology and our physics and our gravity. So these beings have figured out a way to bend space and time and be multi-dimensional beings and travel across to visit us and other worlds as well. So when we come back, I'll do a quick explanation of the theory of relativity as best I can, and we'll continue to talk about have we been visited by extraterrestrials and higher dimensional beings here on Inspired Living. We'll be right back.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside.
Each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Inspired Living. Let me just jump right into it because this show goes by so quick. When you're trying to keep such interesting information and higher thinking knowledge, but try to present it in layman's terms. So before the break, I was talking about these higher dimensional beings and have we been visited by extraterrestrials. And what I mean by higher dimensional beings, which means that they have figured out traveling across this universe that, according to our understanding, is mathematically incomprehensible. It's that big. And in order, so if you think about the ocean back in the days when you had to travel across the ocean, it would take weeks and weeks, which now we can travel, in a matter of, hours. I can go from Seattle to London on a 9-hour flight. And eventually that's going to, speed up as well to where we actually have, the new technology to allow me to go from Seattle to London, Heathrow, in 3 hours, 4 hours. So the theory of relativity is very much the same way. As we proceed, the technology becomes more advanced and we understand propulsion better. We understand, the speed of light. We can only go as fast as the speed of light. But Einstein and his student, Rosenberg, had talked about, gravitational waves, and they had talked about wormholes, or what we would call teleportation, if you've seen the movie Contact, or Interstellar, or Arrival. Those are three great movies that talk about these wormholes, this ability, this freeway, if you will, of channels of bending space and time and going faster than the speed of light, which, as of right now, we don't understand or comprehend based on our physics. But the theory of relativity, the easiest way I can explain it is time will slow down around heavy objects. So if you go around, like a black hole, and Interstellar does a really good job. This is a movie with Matthew McConaughey, and they go around a black hole, and as they go around this big mass, this heavy object, it slows time down. So, for example, there's 4 of them on the ship. 3 of them go down to the planet. They're on this planet for 4 hours. They get stuck down there for 4 hours. But when they come back up to their capsule that's rotating around this object, the one guy they left up there has been up there for 23 years. So think about that. 4 hours perspective down on the planet, their time, they come back, and that same guy has been going around this object for 23 years. So what happens is time will slow down around heavy objects. This is the theory of relativity. Gravity is the curvature of space and time. Speed of light remains consistent. So the speed of light, that's where we haven't figured out how to go faster than the speed of light. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. Time is what we call the fourth dimension, and gravity travels in the form of waves. Now, this is all stuff that has been come to pass as proven as fact, including gravitational waves that Einstein had predicted almost 100 years ago, and those were recently measured just back in 2017, I believe. But what happens is our current understanding of space travel, we can only go so far. It would take us months to go to Mars. It would take us years to get to the outer planets, and we would have to go into what they call stasis, which you'd have to go into some sort of hibernation to make that travel. So this species has figured that out. Anti-gravity propulsion, they've talked about that. They've figured out how to get around the theory of relativity based on space, time, and objects. And what's interesting is David Darling, he's a PhD, he's an astronomer, somebody that I follow. He talked about this, quote, mature civilizations in the galaxy would recognize the risks of first contact and avoid revealing too much about themselves until the time was right. Well, this episode is telling you the time is right. And it shouldn't surprise you. 50 years ago, not only did we not stop going to the moon, but more than 50 years ago, we sent out the first Voyager probe, and on that probe that's still communicating back, it's actually in interstellar space, it left our galaxy, we put a gold record on there. And on the gold record is our information, our DNA, music, what we look like, and we've asked for a communication back. So the timing would be right based on just those events alone. But, what's interesting to me is that you have all these astronauts that have come out. You've got Congress that is publicly revealing, not man-made objects, non-human origin. And then, of course, you've got, us as ancient astronaut theorists that have said they've been here the whole time, just ready to reveal themselves. The question is, are we ready? So there's money, there's budgets. We now have a Space Force that was actually carved out from the Air Force, just like the Air Force was carved out from the Army. We now have a dedicated Space Force with Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess, that are ramping up. Their budgets are increasing. They're actually, enlisting people and hiring contractors. But like I said before, earlier in the show, why is it that the government switched to the private sector? We're seeing SpaceX now. The two rockets, actually, it's interesting. The two perspectives is the Artemis 1 project, which is built by NASA based on older technology, and the SpaceX rocket are side by side almost, and they're doing two different missions. But the SpaceX is more cost effective. It's latest technology. It's cheaper to launch than the Artemis project. But one of the reasons that they started to make this move into the private sector, because I was like, why after all these years, after 70 years of debate and secrecy, that they were starting to reveal and release this metadata, this metamaterial, these transmedium objects, is because when the private sector takes over, they don't have to disclose their information, their research, their knowledge, and or their budgets. So for the government, under the Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA, where I get a lot of my information and a lot of my research that I do when I'm, doing these shows, is I will go to a FOIA request. And what's interesting, now that they've moved into private corporations like Blue Origin, SpaceX, Bigelow Industries is the one that they really moved to years ago. Robert Bigelow is his name. And there's a lot of information there, but the private corporations don't have to reveal anything if they don't want to. It's all private. There's no FOIA request. There's no government oversight. There's nothing. So to me, that was interesting. And what happened is in 2016, Robert Bigelow sold off a research facility known as the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Now, what's interesting, there's a series out there called the Skinwalker Ranch that I've been watching, and they've been doing a lot of science and a lot of tests, and there's some very interesting things. Too much to go over in this podcast, so maybe have to do that at a later time. But they are finding some very bizarre results from their scientific studies. Now, this place in Utah goes all the way back to indigenous, the Comanche tribes, which they named them the Skinwalkers because they had the ability to shapeshift, look different. There's a lot of phenomena, a lot of lights, a lot of UAPs. But what's interesting on this series that was sold from Robert Bigelow to Brandon Fugel, who is a well-known business corporate real estate guru, he bought the ranch because he wanted to know. His questions were, are we alone? Is what's going on with this Skinwalker Ranch? It's been taking place for so many years. And the episodes, they're going to be in their 4th season, are really uncovering some very interesting things. And one of the things they've uncovered recently is every time that there's an interaction, when they start digging in on the ranch, they get some sort of UAP, they get some sort of energy burst, and there's a gigahertz, this 1.6 gigahertz that spikes up on all their different measurements. And they're actually theorizing that this is actually a way to communicate to us using frequency. And so it got me thinking, well, frequency, okay, symbols. Like if you've ever seen vibration in the sacred geometry of when you vibrate something at a certain frequency. Take a singing bowl, for example. That's a frequency and a vibration at 528 hertz, which is a healing frequency. And if you take that and you apply that frequency to a table that vibrates at that frequency, the sand will actually create what we call sacred geometry. All these great, amazing shapes, you change the frequency, the shape will shift. And it's very similar. It reminds me of the crop circles that we see all around the world. Now, of course, people are going to hoax it and say that, but there are some that are so elaborate. It's like, how did they do that? So it's interesting that they've uncovered this 1.6 gigahertz frequency. Every time there's an interaction, this spikes up, and they'll check their equipment, make sure they're not broadcasting. They even did it through a radio station, and the frequency came up when they did the signal through their local radio station there in Utah. So it's fascinating stuff. We're pushing the boundaries. We're looking at new science, a new way to test to get interactions for communications. Now, I said, earlier in the show, I don't believe them to be hostile, because here's why. During our nuclear capabilities, if they were going to interact with us or take us out like in Independence Day and blow up the White House, they would have done that when we reached nuclear capability. Now, if you go back and do your research, there was a lot of interaction with UAPs and UFOs during our nuclear capabilities of the race for the bomb. During World War II, that ended World War II, there was a lot of activity, a lot of reports, a lot of FOIA requests that have been released talking about that. So that's why, in my opinion, I don't feel that they're, nefarious or here to harm us. More of observing us. Observation is a higher intelligence. Violence is actually very low intelligence, if you think about it, very low energy. And if they're that advanced, it would make sense to have low vibration to come to be violent towards us. It's very similar to the jungle theory, and what we've done is we've lit our planet up. We've put a beacon out, we've sent probes out, we've sent gold records out, and now we have the James Webb Telescope, pointing and giving us real-time information, including the makeup of planets. And we've put ourselves out there. And the jungle theory is this: if you go into a jungle, you don't want to light yourself up with a fire because you'll reveal yourself to A-type predators and then you'll become hunted. Well, we've done that for over 70 years now, and I think that they would have already done what they needed to do if that was the case. So that's why, to me, they come across as more intelligent. They've worked through their technology, and they're observing us and just waiting for the right time to reveal themselves. Because that ripple effect, don't take I always say, wait, watch, and witness. When that is revealed, and I do believe it'll be in our roaring 20s, with everything going on, I always said, at this point, it's not an abduction, it's a rescue of what's going down here on the planet. But wouldn't that be something if that brought people together from all walks of life, all different religions, all philosophies, to bring the planet together, what I'm calling the Great Coming Together, and reveal that we are just one of many planets in this, call it a galactic federation of, Star Trek was written about. A lot of people don't know that Gene Roddenberry was the seer. He wrote of things in the future that he saw in his dreams and his visions and his meditations, and he wrote about it, and we've learned since then that science fiction ends up becoming science fact at some point. And one of his, theories was this galactic federation of many species that, have learned to work together in peace and harmony and work through their aggressions. I'm just not sure humans are there yet. Maybe they'll come back maybe for the whales, the dolphins, or the octopus, because they seem to work in community and peace and harmony and take care and respect their planet. So just going back to Captain Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut. We all know that UFOs are real. All we need to ask is, where do they come from and what do they want? That's really the question. That's really the heart that I'm trying to get at with this show is, where do they come from and what do they want? Maybe they don't want anything of us. Maybe they want to share their knowledge. But another mind-blowing thing to me is based on just the course of human evolution and human history. All of a sudden, within the last 100 years, we've gone from, I'd even say maybe 100 years, 150 years. We've gone from the wagon wheel to the International Space Station. We've gone to, just modern radio wave technology, radio frequency, the first radio show, to the iPhone. Something to me just doesn't fit. If you look at stats, all of a sudden, after the 1940s, technology started to really increase. And for me, that tells me that there's material that we've reverse engineered, have a better understanding, and then we put it into the corporate section to manufacture and to harness and use that technology without any oversight or FOIA requests, different from the government. And that to me is why I believe that we have been visited by extraterrestrials, that we have been visited by interdimensional, higher dimensional beings, and that they're with us now, they're observing us now, and they have many places to hide on this planet. You can go down, I did an episode on the secrets of Antarctica. That's going to start to reveal itself in the next 20, 25, 30 years. That's going to, as it melts, as it is now, it's going to reveal a lot of things that we didn't know. But one of the things I want to leave you with as we get ready to close this show, even former President Trump's director of national security, this was interesting to me in the fact that at those highest levels, they usually don't comment on this stuff. And he is quoted as saying, to state that UFOs exhibit, quote, technologies we don't have and that we are not capable of defending against, end quote. So that's a former director of national security saying that there's something there that we just don't understand, we don't have the means to make, and we have no way to defend against it. So that to me is just further proof that we are not alone, and it's just a matter of time. So I always, from a spiritual standpoint, I always say when light workers and starseeds team up to teach humanity the meaning of true diversity and usher that in a new golden age of human enlightenment. That's my hope for our future. That's my hope where we're going, to where us as light workers, as spiritualists, as believers in ufology, that will team up to teach humanity the meaning of true diversity and usher in that new golden age of human enlightenment. And I'll just leave you again with this final quote before we shut down. And again, thanks for listening to me rant on about one of my favorite topics about UFOs, ufology, UAPs, first contact, full disclosure, all of that, stuff in the skies, the stars. Keep looking up. But I'll just leave you with this. Not believing in aliens is like taking a spoonful of water from the ocean and saying there are no whales, dolphins, octopus, sharks in the ocean because there are none in my spoon. Well, eventually that spoon's going to get bigger, that spoon's going to go deeper, and we will realize that we are not alone in the universe and that we have in fact been visited by extraterrestrials and higher dimensional beings. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, caring, and compassionate, and most importantly, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.